Welcome back to another episode of Field Notes for Pet Pros, where story and safety come together. Field Note number 46, The Treat Pouch Problem, Why Serious Incidents Rarely Begin with Reckless Decisions. The morning started like every busy Memorial Day holiday weekend. Coffee, keys, and a full tank of gas. The clock started ticking a full hour before normal visit hours. Thank goodness my clients never complain about getting an earlier than normal visit slot. I call them affectionately the Jumpstart Group. Everything was going great that morning. A stunning sunrise as I headed down Route 303. An absolute perfect morning. Windows down, golden earring playing on the radio. The radio's playing some forgotten song. The road has got me hypnotized and I'm speeding into a new sunrise. Okay, so I can't sing. Routing locked in to avoid the small parade floating around town. 3 visits already completed before most people had even finished their breakfast. Everything smooth, everything practiced, everything automatic. It is that moment when you know you are busy, and the world is all just coming together for a perfect workday. And yes, for those of you now hearing Golden Earring in their heads, the song was Radar Love. At 8:15 a.m., I was already 3-step visits deep into the schedule. Feedings done, medications given, leashes clipped and unclipped in the practice rhythm that comes with years of routine. Alarm systems armed, quick client text sent, on to the next stop. Nothing felt unsafe. In fact, that's probably the point. Serious incidents rarely begin with someone planning to make a bad decision. More often, they begin during completely ordinary moments. Familiar driveways, familiar dogs, familiar routines. A pet sitter who has entered the same home hundreds of times before without issue. The brain relaxes into routine and the work becomes automatic. Holiday schedules amplify that effect. The longer routes, earlier mornings, more client communication, altered routing patterns, increased distractions. Breathe, less recovery time between days, and suddenly small decisions begin stacking up on one another. What happens when familiarity begins replacing active observation? Safety science is increasingly becoming aware that smaller injuries can be reduced, mitigated, not medicated, and controlled. But the big bad dog in the room remains the serious injury and fatality event. And oddly enough, those catastrophic events are increasing across many industries, not just in pet sitting and dog walking. When safety experts began working alongside neuroscience researchers, they discovered something unsettling. The more familiar the routine, repetitive, or automatic a task becomes, the more likely the brain is to shift into fast habitual processing. And often, that is exactly where catastrophic outcomes hide. That understanding maps perfectly onto what professional pet sitters do day in and day out. Picture this. So on this particular busy morning, I came back up from scooping a basement litter box. And Norman, the guardian cat of this domain, met me at the top step. Norman and I had an agreed upon routine. I paid the treat toll, he let me pass. But this morning had been moving along so smoothly, so routine, that I had left my treat pouch in the car. And that is where the story starts to turn. Not because Norman was dangerous, not because I was careless, but because a familiar routine had quietly created an expectation. The cat, Norman, expected the treat. I expected the routine to work. The visit expected me to keep moving. And suddenly, at the top of the basement stairway, a small hissing, missing control changed the exposure risk. Moments like this happen every day in every business. They do not usually happen because someone is careless. They happen because humans carry cognitive load, and because routine is one of the ways the brain helps us move through familiar work efficiently. Most of the time, routine works until one small piece of the routine is missing. On that morning, the missing piece was not a harness, a leash, a gate latch, or a medication label. It was a treat pouch, a tiny thing full of Temptations cat treats. Except I was standing at the bottom of a basement staircase with a cat who had learned the sequence as well as I had. This is not a story about blame. It is not a story about discipline, carelessness, or a pet sitter who should have known better. That is the easy interpretation, and it usually is the least useful one. The more useful question is not, why didn't the sitter do the right thing? Because that is often the first questions organizations ask. The question team leader asks. The question an owner asks. The question that quietly turns into a write-up, a retraining conversation, or a disciplinary file. But modern safety science has increasingly found that focusing only on individual blame often hides the larger operational reality. So the better question is, what changed in the work system, and how easy was it to notice that change before exposure increased? And this is where modern safety science becomes fascinating, because most workers successfully navigate changing conditions, unexpected disruptions, missing controls, distractions, and exposure potential every single day without incident. In many ways, human adaptability is what keeps systems functioning. But serious injury and fatality events often emerge when the moment goes unrecognized, or when someone feels pressure to simply push through the routine anyway. And in professions built on repetition movement, multitasking, and routine environments, it is worth asking, how often do we stop long enough to notice when the routine has quietly changed? Most mornings, the routine works exactly the way we expect it to, until the moment something small changes. And another radar lover gone. So before I tell you what happened, pause and reflect. Tap the treat pouch problem button and answer those reflection questions. Because sometimes the difference between an uneventful visit and a serious incident, it's not recklessness. It is one small deviation inside a system that felt completely normal 5 minutes early. And this is why serious injury and fatality prevention cannot rely entirely on experience, confidence, or being good with animals. It requires something more deliberate: the ability to recognize changing conditions inside familiar work before exposure escalates, the ability to pause when the routine suddenly feels slightly off, and perhaps most importantly, the willingness to admit that even highly experienced professionals are still human beings working inside cognitive systems that can drift into autopilot. In pet care, we often talk about trust, relationships, and compassion. But operational awareness matters because animals learn routines. Humans learn routines. Work systems learn routines. And sometimes the smallest missing piece, like a forgotten treat pouch, a shifted behavior pattern, a blocked exit path, a rushed morning, becomes the moment where the entire exposure picture changes. That's not failure, that's reality. And professionals who learn to recognize those moments early may be the ones who prevent the incident nobody ever thought would happen. Meet me on the live session on Tuesday at 11:30 a.m. We're going to review the first phase of the SIF plan, which you could have downloaded last Wednesday. And I want to take a moment to thank all of my readers, new subscribers, and industry colleagues for your ongoing support. Over the past year, these field notes have gradually grown into something larger than I originally imagined. Thoughtful conversations about the realities of professional pet care, operational safety, animal behavior, and the human beings navigating this work every single day. And perhaps that is the real point of all this. Not perfection, not fear, not blame, but learning to see the work more clearly together. One route, one routine, one near miss, and sometimes one forgotten treat pouch at a time.